So cutting out, I'm going to start with the easy bit, which is the rib areas, and this is simply because they're all nice easy rectangles to cut out, so it's really simple. I've got my piece of grey marl rib here. You can see that it's on a loop, so you get two folds, one here and one here, and we can use those to help us cut things out. And the rib, you can see the direction of the knit is this way, so that's the direction where you want the fold to be, just in case you haven't got a piece with a fold on it. You want your fabric to run this way. You don't want to be sort of having you want your hemband to stretch across the width. You don't want to be this way. Look at the difference in how much stretch there is that way and that way. So just before you're cutting, if it's not obvious, just double check that you're cutting, and that if you think about your jumper, the rib is running this way vertically along the width of your bands. So here's my hemband, and that says place on the fold, so I'm going to put that up against the fold there, and I should just put a few pins. You can use pattern weights or pins. I'm going to use these pins just because the pattern weights I've got are quite big and some of these pieces are fairly small, so and I'm going to use pins to hold them in place, and then I'm going to use my rotary cutter to cut the pieces out. Let's put that straight. And so that fold there, that edge of the piece of paper is next to the fold. And then the cuff, I'm doing the balloon sleeve, so I've got the deeper cuff. Oops, and I haven't cut it out to my size. Let's fold that back there. Should be cutting a size 3. There we go. So that can just go anywhere. That isn't cut on the fold, that's the entire cuff. So what will happen is that will wrap round, it will get folded in half, and that will wrap round my wrist like that. So I need to cut 2 of those, and again I want this grain line here to be running in the same direction as the ribs, or the same direction as the knit. It's just really important to get that the right way. If you want, you can measure from the edge to the grain line, just like you would on a woven fabric, to make sure that it is absolutely straight. My ribs are pretty obvious on this fabric, so I can just see that the edge of that pattern piece is dead straight, running along that rib there. Still locked in my room. No one's come to rescue me. I'm quite glad. It's quite a nice design feature having a room without a door handle. And then I'm going to pop this one. It actually says place on fold. So I want that. Here's the fold here. So will it fit now? So I'm just going to pop that one on the fold here. And that's cut 1. And because it's placed on the fold, I know that that's going to be nice and straight. And then I'm just going to use my rotary cutter to cut round those. I'll swivel them round so I can see what I'm doing. So hemband, you've got to cut 2. So once I've cut this out, the folds there, that will open up, that will make the front hemband, and then I'll put that over here and cut out the other one, so I'll end up with 2 of those. This one is just cut 1, so this is the fold here, that will open up, that will go all the way around my neck. And this is the sleeve cuff, that's cut 2. I'm going through 2 layers of fabric simultaneously, so I'll end up with 2 pieces there. I've got a nice new blade in my rotary cutter that I put in it the other day. Just be careful when you're rotary cutting that your fingers are well away from the blade as well, because they're sharp. Okay, so I hope you're enjoying this. This is my first session of the year. There is a little notch there. That's just to show the halfway point where you're going to fold it in half. I shall snip that later. I'm not going to try to create notches using a rotary cutter because that's just too dangerous. I use my little snip scissors to create the notches. There we go. Now if you've got scissors and you're not using a rotary cutter, that's absolutely fine. It's just rotary cutters are quite nice for cutting knit fabrics. So there's everything cut out. I'll give you a little tip here. These are my cuffs. What I'll do at this point is I'll just label everything. I'll take the pattern off it because I don't like leaving pins in things. I'm just going to label each piece just so that I can remember. And what I'll do is I'll open it up and I'll label them on the wrong side. Just because you've got so many rectangles, it can be a bit sort of tricky when you come to make it. I'm going to put a C there for cuff. I'm just using a bit of masking tape. You can use a sticker. A C there for cuff. So I know that those are my 2 cuff pieces, and I know that this was the inside of the tubes. That's the right side, that's the wrong side, and I'm not going to get confused. So there's my cuff pieces. Here's my neckband, which was cut on the fold. So I open that up, ta-da, and I'm going to put it on the inside as well. And I'm just going to put NB for neckband. It's obvious because it's a very different shape and size, but you know, if it's the first time you're making something, it all helps. And then my hemband, which I've got 2 of, which were both cut on the fold. So again, I will open this up and I shall put an H for hem on there. And it will just make things nice and clear when we come to sew it up. And I will always be using this side of the rib, which is nice and consistent. Okay, so I've moved to my slightly bigger dining room table in order to cut out the main body of the project. Now the first thing that you need to do is lay out your fabric and then find the selvages. So they, with jersey fabrics, with knitted fabrics, they kind of have a gluey edge. On this particular fabric, it's kind of got a slightly different design on the edge. And then you're going to fold those into the middle. Now with sewing patterns where both the front and the back are cut on the fold, you will often find that the pattern requires you to lay the fabric out and then fold it into the middle, so the selvages meet in the middle. And the reason for this is that you then have 2 lovely long folds to put your pattern pieces on. So your centre back will run along one fold and your centre front will run along the other fold, and then those pieces that you cut will then butterfly open out like this, and you'll have one big symmetrical pattern piece. And that is what they ask you to do here. So you're folding into the middle and you're cutting your back and front bodice on the fold. Once you've cut out your back and front bodice, you then use the remaining fabric, fold that in half and cut your pair of sleeves out. So we'll focus on the back and front first. There's the front and there's the back. Now you'll see, here's the place on fold, here's the centre back, and here's the place on fold centre front. In order to make use of both of those folds, I just have to flip that back one over like this. And that's what I'm going to match up there to that fold. So it doesn't matter that I'm looking at the wrong side of the pattern there, because when it opens out it's symmetrical and you get one of each side. What you might want to do, however, is just transfer any of these important notches over to the wrong side and mark them on here so that it makes it easier for you to mark those notches in place, or to snip into those notches. So the back goes like this with the centre back on the fold, and then the front, I'm going to slide my fabric over a little. I've got my cutting mat under here as well. Let's just slide that all over. Use the cutting mat to help me slide. Okay, and then the front here, this is going to line up with this fold here. Let's check that you can see that on the screen, yeah. So this is going to line up with this fold here. Now if you're not making the pockets, you're not going to cut along this pink line, and you're going to just go around the edge there. If you are going to make the pockets, then you're going to need to cut around the corresponding pink line to the size that you're making. I've done that here. Ta-da! What I've done is I've just left it attached a little bit at the top there, so that I don't lose that piece, because if I ever want to go back and make it without pockets, then it's still attached, and I just fold that. Otherwise I know that that's going to get lost that little bit. So there you go. So the front is placed on the fold, the back is placed on the fold, and obviously, you know, the bigger sizes would come out like so and meet more in the middle. But that's how you do the centre front and centre back bits. And then we're left with the remainder of the fabric here, which once we've cut these bits out, then we come to this part in order to cut, and we use that to cut our sleeves from. We've got plenty of fabric, and that's generally speaking the layout for most of the sizes. If you're using fabric like this, which is 140 or 150 wide, which most jerseys are, because it tends to be the quilting cottons that are the 112 centimetre wide fabrics, and the dressmaking fabrics you will find are more kind of 140, 150 wide. That's generally the convention that you will find. So yeah, your selvage should be in the middle, fold that in, and there we go. We know that we're on the straight grain because we're cutting along the fold. Just double check with yourself. Obviously, again, like I said before, the direction of your knit needs to run vertically down the down the length of your jumper. So your knit, if you've got, this is a slightly unusual fabric, this one. If you're cutting with a normal French terry or a sweat fabric, then you'll see that you've got rows and rows, just like on my knitted jumper. It's a bit fluffy, but you can see there's rows and rows of knit. They run vertically along the length of the sleeve and vertically along the length of my body from my neck down to my hem. So you just want those rows of knit to be running vertically along the length. I can hear my cat meowing at me now. The kids are asleep and the cat started. It's there's a huge storm blowing outside at the moment. I'm going to use my makeshift pattern weights, which are heavy coasters. You'd have thought I'd got myself some pattern weights by now, wouldn't you? That might be the next thing on my list. It's my birthday in a few months. There you go, pattern weights. That's what I shall ask for. There we go. So I'm just going to make sure that that's nice and flat, and it's right on that lovely fold there. Everything's sitting nice and smooth, and I've got my cutting mat underneath, and I'm just going to take my rotary cutter and zip around the edge. Okay, so my cutting mat is just under there, and I'm now just going to carefully go around the edge of my pattern with my rotary cutter. I'll keep any scraps in a little pile because it's good to have some scraps to use for testing your stitches, testing your tension on your machine before you go on to sewing your garment. It's always exciting, the moment when you start cutting out, because it's the point of no return. Yay, we're sewing today! We're making something! Hooray! Now, as always, if I have a little awkward bit like this that I can't quite get into, I just rough cut it, so just to free it from the fabric behind. Whoops. And then I can sort of swivel my cutting mat a little bit so that I can get in there a bit more easily. And then I'll come round and cut that nicely. I've got my snips, and anywhere there's a notch, I'm just making a tiny little incision into the edge, only ½ centimetre if that, just to mark out any important positions, and these notches will help you to match up your pattern with its partnering, match up your seams with the other seams, match up the front to the back, match up the sleeve with the armhole, etc, etc. Just want to make sure that you're just a tiny little snip just into that seam allowance area there, just to say you're going to match up to you and you're going to match up to you, and it helps you match everything together. There is our first pattern piece cut out. So this will eventually become the centre back, or the back of my sweater dress. So I'll set that to one side, and we shall move on and do the same on the front. The other side, we're now just going to repeat that exact same process on the other side. And you're now going to use that remaining bit of fabric that you have at the top to cut your sleeve. So with the sleeve, you'll see you've got this grain line. You need to make sure that the grain line here is parallel to the fold or parallel to the selvage. You don't want it to be like this, because then the knit won't run, the grain of that fabric won't run in the right direction. You want everything to be nice and true, especially like this one where you've got a spot there as well. So you want this to run parallel to this fold. So what I'll do is I'll measure from the fold in, I think it's about 29 centimetres there. Pop in and then do the same at the top. It doesn't have to be 29, it's just whatever measurement you have here must be the same here. So I know now everything is nice and parallel. Oops, it's curling up a bit at the end there. So I'll put these pattern weights, or coasters as they're otherwise known, and I've got my cutting mat underneath, checking my cutting mat is all the way underneath there. And then we're going to just go round in the same way and cut using our rotary cutter all the way around the sleeve. And then with the remaining fabric, you should have quite a nice chunk to the side there of remaining fabric. and you can use that to cut out your final two pattern pieces, which is the pocket bag and the pocket facing, and you need to cut one pair of each of those. So it says cut two there. Make sure you're cutting with the fabric folded in half so that when it opens up you have a pair. You don't want to cut two, one like that and one like that, because these are going to sit on either side of your dress. The cat is going to jump up and join us, I think. And then here's the other piece of the pocket bag. That's going to be hidden behind the front of the dress, and that's just going to sit there like that to create the pocket. So again, you're going to want a pair of those. So cut a pair of each of those two as well as your sleeve. And that is all of the cutting done. So again, this fabric is folded in half, so I'm cutting a pair. So I'll end up with a pair of sleeves. And you can cut your fabric right sides together or wrong sides together. If you're cutting a print, it's quite nice to do it so that you can see how the print looks on your fabric, if it's a feature of the design. If you're making lots of markings and what have you, then you might want to do all of those on the wrong side of the fabric, but it doesn't really matter too much. Oops, there we are. And I'm just going to come round as I did before and just snip a tiny little bit into the fabric. There's one at the top of the sleeve there at the shoulder. Two little notches at the back armhole. And there. So we're all cut out. Let's talk you through the pieces you should have. One back cut on the fold, your front piece cut on the fold, a pair of sleeves, your neckband cut in the rib, a pair of the sleeve cuffs cut in the rib, two hem bands cut in the rib, 1 and 2, your pocket bag and your pocket facing, and you should have a pair of each of those. Oops. Okay, and then a pile of scraps, because you're going to want to test your stitches. So you've got your pocket facing, pocket bag, hemband, sleeve, cuff, neckband, front and back. I hope that all makes sense. Enjoy your cutting out, and I shall see you tomorrow when we shall start to sew this all up. Have a lovely week, a lovely day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.